Okay, welcome everyone to the Great Data Debate 2025. As you know, this panel is the flagship keynote panel of Big Data London. It's been running from the very beginning now, so this is the 10th year of this debate. And we've got wonderful panelists who I'm truly honored to all of them to have made the trip all the way from the US, every single one of them. So rather than me mess up reading out their bios, let me ask them to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Vivian. Why don't we start with you ladies first?
I thought I built a deflection
did.
wall, but okay. Hi, I'm Vivian Wei, COO for Salesforce Unified Agentforce Platform Apps and Industries. I've been with the company for the last 9 years, based in San Francisco. So I came all the way here to be with all of you. Really honored.
Mary.
I'm Mary Osborne. I'm a product manager for a software company called SAS. I've been in technology for almost 30 years, mainly in natural language processing, and I teach computational linguistics at Duke University.
Okay, Jeremiah.
Hi, my name is Jeremiah Stone. I'm the CTO of SnapLogic, and spend a lot of time in the application space, in the industrial space, and now I'm paying for my sins trying to get all the things to work together.
Okay, Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris Saberger. I'm a VP of Engineering at Elation. Prior to Elation, was at a company called NumberStation, which Elation bought in May, and primarily leading AI initiatives at Elation. Excited to be here.
And last but not least, David.
David Kalmuck. I'm a distinguished engineer at IBM, and I lead the technical strategy for our databases and core software. So that's DB2 and all its various form factors, a bit of Netezza, and I spent basically my entire career doing database technology. So, database builder. Looking forward to some interesting conversation here.
Okay, so let's get the ball rolling then. I want to first of all look at the future of sort of analytics and AI. We're kind of, a long way into analytics in general, probably 30 plus years in business intelligence. We've been, 10 or 15 years into data science now. And now we've got AI agents everywhere and a flood of agent builder tools. I mean, it seems this year that the in word for Big Data London is agentic. And so, it also seems that natural language is the new UI. I mean, would you agree? Is that it? It's natural language or nothing? Or are we still going to drag and drop? Anybody want to take that on?
I'm happy to start. So actually, at my previous company, we were building largely like a chatbot to sit on top of structured data. And I think there's a lot of pros and cons to natural language. My take on this would be it's part of the future, but it's not the only thing in the future, right? I think you still have dashboards that are there. You're still going to have all these drag and drop functionality. Chat's going to have to be a part of it. It's accessible. Everyone can use natural language. But it's not the only thing. You still need a lot of the other pieces.
So the claim that dashboard is dead is not really true. We're kind of saying they're still around because we are now seeing all of these agents generating visualizations on the fly, as opposed to figuring out as a user what visualization to choose. I mean, but you think we still have a future of the two together?
I think the mentality around dashboards need to shift. But dashboards are always going to exist. Now, it could just be AI-generated dashboards. Humans still might want to be in the loop, right? Publishing certain things, pulling certain things out, et cetera. So the mentality around dashboards might be dead, but I think dashboards as a whole they're here. They're going to continue to stay around.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever had to fight with an LLM to do something very, very specific, but I just imagine, it's great for standing stuff up quick. But if you are trying to do something very specific, or if you just want to move this from here to there, I'd rather just do it. I think the sort of hands-on stuff has to synergize with the LLM, the natural language stuff. I can't
Mary,
imagine.
Mary, you're really like a natural language
And I do. I love NLP.
Nerd.
I love natural language. But I also recognize that there are challenges with natural language in that not everybody prompts very well. So if you have a bunch of users who don't understand how to prompt the model effectively, they're not going to get any greater results than they would from a dashboard that gives them something that somebody thought they were asking for but weren't really asking for. So we have problems getting users to articulate what they need to see in a dashboard to a human being. If you introduce a bot to that, I think it just complicates things further. So I don't think dashboards are going to go away immediately. I think the paradigm will shift and we'll look at dashboarding in different ways. But at the end of the day, users have to have access to good data. And like I've been in tech for a very long time, and we're still talking about how to give our users access to really good data. We still have a lot of problems consolidating information and getting the pieces together that people actually need to be able to make decisions from. So once we get the data squared away, and once we get our users trained in ways that they can actually prompt the model effectively, then maybe we'll go to full-scale conversational BI. But I think we have some work to do before we can get there.
Well, I mean, what's the goal, right? So is the goal that we can put motivated reasoning on steroids? I mean, if I'm a business executive and I can ask the question any way I want to ask the question, I think that's a really interesting unintended consequence. Mm-hmm. That I can frame a query, I can frame an output, I can frame, you know, the issue we've had for years. The easier we make the analytic creation experience, the more fragmented we can create the ability to work together across departments, across businesses, et cetera. And so I think the notion of curation and design for the outcome you're going for is really important. And if you're giving every user the ability to take their perception of the question they're asking, frame it exactly the way they want to do it, and give them back exactly what they asked for, I think you run the risk of creating a massive motivated reasoning engine where people are going to seek to drive the analytics to the outcome that they're driving for. And so, I mean, I think the question then becomes, well, if we're going to, yes, knock down the barriers for a person who needs to answer a question in short order as quickly as possible and not get in line to build it, the framework for having that inference be something that is, objective in the business doesn't exist today. Doesn't. Right now, we're really just taking things and saying, well, can I take, a question and turn that into a reasonably, constructed prompt and then get some SQL out the other end that doesn't, throw up all over the place. That's kind of the state of the art right
I have to admit, I've never seen SQL throw up all over the place, but that, yeah.
Well, from a data perspective, look, I've got solution engineers that give beautiful demos of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then the next step is, well, how do I implement this in a way that if manager A, manager B, and manager C all ask the same question on their data, that they're going to get a congruent answer, from the.
But you kind of see prompt libraries already, kind of, people creating these, getting these prompts right, kind of putting them out there. I've already got clients doing this, their own custom UIs with, just single-click prompts on them so that people don't even have to ask the question for the popular stuff.
Well, I think that's the direction it goes in. Look, I think the direction of our design of what will work is we as humans want our technology to be more human. We want it to move with us. We want it to work with us in our language. We want it to work together. And we want to have the same kind of trust as if you had a high-end, capable analyst to work with. And that's a beautiful dream. And I think we should all be working very hard to deliver that dream. But I think in the current state right now, we need to be careful where we are in that. I do think curated experiences with some of metadata management, et cetera, can take us in that direction.
Do you think
but then your garden path. So then you're sort of back to square one with dashboards giving users information that they maybe thought they were asking for but aren't. So I want an easy answer.
But a good structured dashboard experience that's comparable over time is an incredibly valuable thing.
Yeah.
I think the easy answer is, I wear the business hat. I run the engineering organization as a COO. I think about where are our teams investing our resources, building the technology, what is going to maximize our value, our return. And then I go back to, okay, what is the biggest problem where our teams are literally wasting time doing repeatable processes today, right? And I identify, okay, there's like 10 big problems we have to solve, and here's this one problem we need to solve. And then you use data, design the prompts out of the box, and make it easy for for our internal customers, which is our teams, or externally for our customers. And so, when we did when we launched Salesforce Agentforce, that's literally the approach. We look at our existing support use case, and on our website, we literally have thousands of customers come to our website, ask questions, support, raise tickets, and we had human labor that's answering those repeatable questions through FAQ, a lot of internal documentation. And then what we did was we built, we have a data cloud that's grounding all of the data, and you have that library, right, with underpinned by the metadata layer. And then on top, we do have the agent as the UI, and now you can go on help.salesforce.com and ask any questions, whether it's, what is Agentforce, or where's my pizza? And you're gonna get responses that have certain guardrails, because the agent is not gonna answer questions about the pizza delivery. That's not part of the job, right? So then I think about, okay, if I'm on the other end as a user, what kind of dashboard would I want to know? I mean, then I design the dashboard accordingly based on...
So you mean like if I want to know what Agentforce is and I want to eat my pizza at the same time, I can't do it?
Sorry?
I'm just saying, if I want to ask what Agentforce is and I eat my pizza at the same time, I can't do that, right?
Ooh, we should test it actually, right? Because, I mean, look, it took various iterations, but if you ask, where's my pizza,
right,
the agent is going to say.
All right, let's move on a little bit. In the year since this last debate, we've seen the emergence of MCP as 10 months ago, and now only 5 months ago, we got A2A. And, yet it's kind of gone viral already. And, it seems to be MCP servers it's just like popcorn. I mean, there's everywhere, right, But yet, I've seen some pretty damning articles about MCP in terms of security risks and things like that. I mean, it looks pretty unstoppable to me already. But, I mean, is it ready for prime time, do you think?
I think it's halfway there.
Halfway there.
I mean, the reason I said that is, I think it's penetrated and it's mature enough that you can do stuff with it, but it's maybe not mature to the level where, at an enterprise level, general usage, there's established practices for everything. And I'm thinking of things like MCP gateways, that things that consolidate identity and user management and governance and audit and all that business. They seem to be emerging, but they're not there and they're not mature. So I imagine if you're a skilled practitioner, you know exactly what you're doing, you can do something bespoke, make it work mission critical enterprise scale, but you could also hurt yourself really badly if you don't know what you're doing. And I don't know what the others have seen, but at least from what I've seen, it's emerging, it's maturing. It's not at the state where it's like, oh yeah, everyone knows how to do MCP, and you don't see prompt hacks and data leakage and stuff. I think that's all still a big problem that hasn't really been solved.
So the whole governance thing around it's still got a ways
to
go.
grow up, I think.
Yeah.
I'd agree. I mean, I think the kernel of the idea that we can have consistent, high quality usage of tools in a either in a direct line or in a loop within a system we design is a really great idea. I think the origin story of being the thing a desktop tool is going to use to communicate with those tools, created certain flaws in the initial specification, and as that's evolving, it's getting better and better. But we talk about, in particular, authorization, identification. We still don't know how we can fine-grained control across individual tools in an MCP call, or what happens when you want to have federated MCP servers and those sorts of things. So I think there's definitely some hardening and scalability, but I think the kernel of the idea to have higher performing conversational systems or text-driven systems is a great idea. A2A to me feels like even more ahead of its time in terms of we would have high-functioning individual agents that then would be interoperable with each other and then communicate in a team fashion. But again, I think the basic ideas here that we're going to create digital labor that'll do useful things for us at scale is a really great idea. we need to continue to lean in as users and as technology creators to harden the systems. But I would say not quite ready for broad scale rollout. On the other hand, if you're an architect in a large system company that moves relatively deliberatively, I'd say you need to be thinking about this in your architecture now.
Okay. But obviously we're now talking, now that we have these kind of, particularly 808, we're now see all the marketing about agentic applications, multiple agents and everything like that. And I'm looking at this going, so like, how do I test this? I mean, like, is there any best practices here? I mean, how do organizations figure this out? Because, you got to know this is going to work, right? I mean, are you seeing anything in your own practices, in your own customers about best practices around this? Because it seems to be,
I mean,
trial and error or something, right?
So we try to exemplify before we can enable, and so we have multiple agents in production in our own business as well. And I think what we're finding is that the science of evaluation along the chain of what's going on, and evals is the hard thing right now, even on a single unit basis. So if we can figure that out, maybe we can figure out these more complex systems, but we're very capable of creating the complexity before we can find how to drive quality through the system. So at least for my customers, it's definitely at individual agent level and evals within the agentic flows themselves to be able to consider a consistent baseline of performance and be able to understand that through time relative to model drift or concept change, et cetera, within the stores that they're using. I don't know, would anybody else have similar or different experiences?
I think evaluation is definitely an area that needs to be continue to be focused on. It's an area that, when I'm talking to my customers, there's still many of them that are deeply involved in siloed science projects, and they'll have things that they'll come to us and say, this is working really great. I'll say, well, how do you know? What methods are you using to evaluate the results of that? And they'll say, haven't thought about that yet. But it's the same thing that happened early with LLMs. It was the same thing. People felt like they were getting all these stellar results, but when feet are held to the fire and they have to prove it, they were having a very difficult time. And that's something that even with, now we can call it traditional Gen AI outside of agents, it's still an area that is ripe for innovation and to make things simpler. And with my background in NLP, I look at LLM evaluation, agentic evaluation. Most of them are basically unstructured data problems. And we have to look at things like, how faithfully is the model responding? How comprehensive is the response for the specific types of prompts? And these are things that a lot of people aren't really focused on. So they very much love the beginning process and watching things work. But again, when their feet are held to the fire, they have a really hard time explaining how they got the answers, because nothing we're doing is truly explainable, but they can't even justify some of the responses. And that's incredibly problematic. That's the thing that would keep me up at night, is the fact that we're deeply involved in all of these technologies without really good success criteria. And that's really what's driving down the ROI numbers that many of our customers are seeing.
And I think it's especially problematic for the analytics industry as a whole too, right? So like, you have a background in NLP, so like, I say F1 score, Confusion matrix, you're like, yeah, I get that. You go talk to someone who's like writing SQL queries for a living or an analytics engineer, they're like, what the hell did you just say, right? So I think there is a ton of work to be done in terms of making this really accessible to a broader audience outside of just AI experts and machine learning experts. And 100%, this is what we see as well, is like evals are the hard thing to get right. There's tons of product to build around getting these evals right. And until you have something like this to kind of tie it back to the first question, you can't say something like a dashboard is dead if you have no clue how to evaluate how well things are coming back. Like when I pull up that dashboard every day, I get the same damn thing every time.
Right.
These are non-deterministic systems that we're looking at replacing deterministic processes. So there's a ton of work that needs to go into this evaluation piece. So couldn't agree more on that. I think the separate thing though, like back to the question around MCP A2A, it's like easy to test it. Like go ahead, test it. The hard part is getting it into production, so getting the evals or getting things like the authentication, et cetera, that was brought up over the line and actually pushing it into production. But agree pretty wholeheartedly with
Okay, let's move on a little bit to the kind of, the fact that with so much data around it, it all needs to be AI ready is what we're, all hearing. And of course, vector databases have been popping up all over the place. And now it's like every tool's got a vector database, and then the customer's now got a gazillion vector databases in there. And we've got to build pipelines for all of this. And so there's this kind of burden that appears, this big dark cloud of all these pipelines to vectorize everything. I mean, it just seems to me that, there's another layer of complexity here. And, how should companies manage all this? I mean, on the one hand, we're being told, well, it's RAG, you need to vectorize everything. And then people say, oh, no, what about graph RAG? Let's go and have a graph and we'll go that way. I mean, it's like, well, is there a best practice here? How do you see this being done? Because to me, we're almost putting a burden on customers with all of this. I almost get the feeling like, as soon as it lands, why don't you just automate the vectorization of it? I mean, make it a lot easier. I mean, what do you think? I mean, how do customers deal with all of this?
I can give you sort of, this is sort of very database-centric view.
Yeah, this is
my take on it, at least probably a little biased, but I see the vector, really just as, another data type, another type of index, in the sense that I'm of the school of thought that the vector storage and indexing belongs with the data it represents. In a relational database, that would just be another column type, another index. But the reason I'm saying that is, at least what I'm seeing, the semantic search and vector indexes, it isn't just about RAG. I mean, RAG's the very prominent use case, but we got clients that are doing things like product recommendations or fraud detection or credit checks, all things that sort of take data and you can generate embeddings and use similarity to figure it out. And for that type of use case, if I'm querying, if that's an added query to my application on a database, I want that all in my database. I want to be able to do my SQL. And, when I'm doing I'm checking for matches in, shoes similar that I might like, similar to what I'm trying to buy. I want to filter that down to a region. I want to use all my regular filtering and predicates and all that business. And I want my data security and the transactional integrity and the backups and the HA and all the stuff that I get from my data management layer. It's there. If I can, even the pipelines you're talking about, it helps me if I can generate my embeddings as part of the ingest process that feeds my database. Then I don't need something new. Now, that I don't know if this translates all the way across unstructured, but at least for sort of structured data, that's a model that seems to
I mean, and I think it's fair to say, databases have already added vector data types and functions and everything like that. And given all of the robust capabilities within a database already, bringing that capability on top of vectorized data just makes a lot of sense. But there's still the unstructured world, right?
What we tell our customer is don't boil the data ocean. Make your cup of tea first.
Yeah.
Since I'm in London, that's what everybody talks about. And this is also from our own experience. We built our data cloud, which creates a unified view of our customers across the entire customer 360. So when we were building the help agent as an example, we realized, hey, we have all this knowledge articles going back 25 years. Not all of them are the single source of truth anymore. So you have to cleanse that data. And then on top of that, you don't feed the data cloud everything. You only feed it the most relevant set of information.
So I kind of think what we're saying here is that for unstructured data, I mean, it's got to go through the same governance process as everything else. And therefore, you know, we need the lineage, we need to process it through pipelines, we need that provenance, and then it's that subset, if you like, of data that's going to become AI ready.
It's like
but it's not boil the ocean. You know?
ETL for
Yeah, it's
unstructured.
ETL. Yeah.
And people forget that unstructured data is data, and that you do have to go through data quality measures if you want it to make sense. Otherwise, you end up with the garbage in, garbage out stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talk to a lot of organizations who will say things like, we want to take all of our customer service records, put it into a vector data store, and use that as the source of the truth for a customer service bot. And when I tell them that's a terrible idea, they're shocked. And they're like, but more data is always better, right? Like, not if it's crap. So we have to work on making sure that there's not a lot of duplication. We have to make sure that there's not a lot of ambiguity. All of these things that skew responses when you start involving an LLM, because the data is noisy. We have to have very nicely targeted data sources, which kind of takes us back to when we're architecting these types of solutions, when we're looking at to create a vector data store, hopefully you have a nice, solid, targeted use case. And I say hopefully because I talk to a lot of people that don't. But hopefully you have a nice, solid, narrowly defined use case that you can curate the right data for, so you can reduce things like hallucinations, and you can provide value to your users.
I think what you brought up is really important, especially for this audience. The agentic AI revolution is really a business landscape problem, and a lot of customers we work with, other data practitioners, our first advice is like, hey, at the end of the day, you need to get stakeholder buy-in from your executive C-suite. And everybody, board members, CEOs are asking for value. So how do you pick the right use case? Theoretically, that's going to provide them with the value. Then you go hunt for the most relevant data and go down that path. Rather than, hey, I have a data problem,
Right.
Let me solve the data problem. Then you're in the data ocean swimming with no end in
Exactly.
sight.
I think, you know, on this topic, Mike, when we were seeing this come, as an integration vendor, we get to see both all of the innovation in the vendor landscape, because we have to support it constantly, you know, 1,000 points of simultaneous drift, and then we see the adoption. So we have this incredible long tail, right? Because we have to support everything, and then you see where the adoption is. I think this is one case where the incumbent vendors caught up really fast, right? So you had some, you know, specialized vector stores out there originally, but it was an amazingly short product cycle before all of the other data stores had a vector management, you know, to David's point. And I think that's not wrong, right? Because it's just a different indexing model in a way. But what we're seeing from an adoption point of view is adoption is following, to Vivian's point, the human and business architecture of the way organizations operate. So where is it leading from? A lot of it's sales and marketing to begin with. And that's where that content type is coming from. And then it's going to adhere to the incumbent data stores in that area. And I think that makes a lot of sense. What's really interesting there, though, is there's durable unstructured data that doesn't change, and then there's very ephemeral, fast-moving, you know, structured data. And the data store problem on that is different. And I do like the innovation that some of the document stores have, where they can have, you know, the sort of subsection, you know, chunk updating effectively, where they're not updating everything when a document gets changed. They're updating subsegments of it, and that's very efficient, is very cost effective, and it helps for the design. But then you have to know, as a designer of these systems, is your data durable? Is it a knowledge store for a system that hasn't changed in a long time, or is your data ephemeral? Is it product reviews? Is it a travel site? Is it something that's much faster? And I think, again, thoughtful design with the end in mind is going to drive that question of a specialized vector store that's, you know, really good at a certain thing, or your standard indexing using vectors in a you know, whether you're in Mongo or you're in Snowflake or whatever to be able to do your work.
I'll state this more strongly than I actually believe it, but like I think the community got a little drunk on vector databases, and it's not clear. Like I think you need vector data store, just to be clear. but how much? Right? If you actually look what happened this summer, there's a really interesting lesson, right? So like Cursor had the big market share, right, for coding applications. Then Claude Code is just like taken over. Claude Code has a very fancy algorithm called BM25 that's powering their search. They got rid of the embeddings, right, in terms of how they're powering it. Are we using it too much, and do people think it's just a silver bullet that it isn't, when actually we should be using these classic algorithms more? I think we're going to see a teetering kind of back towards more classical algorithms. To be clear, you need the embeddings, you need semantic search. I don't actually believe that you don't need that, but I think we probably went too far in one direction, and there's going to be more of like these hybrid approaches, like contextual reasoning from Anthropic, where you should be able to do this in a unified system, and we probably went too far in one direction.
All right, okay. Let's move it along a little bit. I want to talk about context. It's kind of the big word at the moment. Everyone's talking about ontologies, or if you go around the exhibition floor, I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen semantic layer on all these booths, right? I mean, but the trouble with semantic layer is it means different things to different people depending on what background you came from. I mean, like if you go talk to structured data folks, yeah, we'll put our business glossary in place with our common vocabulary and our synonyms, and we'll read a catalog and we'll scan everything and map it to the glossary and all that kind of good stuff. And then we'll produce data products and common terms, and we'll put it all in a property graph. And then I kind of go looking at the self-service analytics vendors, and they're putting in things like synonyms and joins and formulas and all these kind of things in their semantic layers. And then when I go over to the unstructured side, what you get over there is a very different understanding, because they came out of the semantic web world, right? And it was all RDF and all of that stuff, right? And at one point I really thought RDF was in intensive care. I mean, I thought like this thing is on its knees, and all of a sudden it's like, on a comeback to some extent. But, over there, people talking about all of that with respect to search and taxonomies and everything else. But today, what I'm seeing is people want to ask a natural language question, and they want to get an answer back, but they want it to have looked at structured and unstructured data and give them holistic insights. And, given the fact that we don't seem to have any metadata standards out there, and let's face it, our industry hasn't got a great reputation in that department. What are we going to see here? I mean, are we going to see this get resolved? Are we going to have just fractured semantic layers all over the place? As another level of complexity. Forget vector databases now. We've got semantic layers everywhere. We got bits. In fact, I don't know if you noticed yesterday, of course, it made me change my slides for this morning, which was a snowflake announcement of the open semantic interchange. I'm going, what is this, like a marketplace for semantic layers or something? And then they announced it as a standard, and I'm going like, really? How can you just say that's a standard? So, I mean, how do people deal with this? Because they're trying to bring these two worlds together, and yet we've got fractured semantics in a gazillion different formats out there. I mean, what's the answer?
I have people coming back to taxonomy. Like you were saying, it's old school kind of approaches, trying to make some order out of the chaos. And when we talk about text, taxonomy is easy to follow. So having something structured, something to provide some level of structure to the unstructured data seems to make people feel better. And at least it can help when you start talking about your vector data stores and integrating those with RAG. So I don't think anybody has the answers you're looking for right now, because and the fact that they're coming back to taxonomy tells me that they're at least researching things that have existed in my domain for a long time. And some of the answers might be there, but I don't think anybody's got a clear vision on that yet.
Yeah, I don't think any of these concepts are new, right? It's just different ways
RDF
talking about
RDF
metadata.
and Sparkle have been around forever.
Yeah, I unfortunately wrote a paper on Sparkle way back in the day. Don't read it. But anyways, so I don't think any of these concepts are new, but I think they're just different ways about talking about storing metadata and giving context to agents. I do think the announcement from Snowflake is important in terms of at least they're trying to drive towards some sort of standard, right, for people to pull all these things together. And maybe it's a knowledge graph, maybe it's a knowledge base, maybe I don't know exactly what the answer is. But what the most important part is that can all the agents kind of speak the same language on top of this? And maybe it doesn't have to be the actual same structure and all these different sources that we're pulling in, as long as the LLMs and agents can make sense out of it. But I think a lot of old concepts are going to be revisited here, would be my guess.
So it's kind of wait and see and figure out, what. I mean, because quite clearly there's
I think
stuff
everyone
going
has
on.
their own approach right now, right? Like they're all building their own version of it. They're all providing metadata context in some fashion towards these agents, and everyone's kind of doing it in their own way. I do think the announcement from Snowflake is important in terms of, hey guys, like, can we try to standardize this? Is my read on the announcement, which I think is important. But yeah, I think it's wait and see right now until there is some standardization.
But I do think you hit an important point, which is agents are kind of a catalyst that's forcing this together. There is pressure now.
Yeah, there is.
No idea
pressure.
where it's going to end up.
No question, there's pressure.
I mean,
I'm getting it all the time in consulting engagements. Or customers are asking, what's going to happen here? What do we do here? And people trying to build their own, clients trying to build it in property graphs. But even within big enterprises, there's diehards coming out of both, all directions, going it's RDF or no, it's not, or it's put it all on Iceberg and we'll hit it with SQL.
I think that's probably closest to the answer, right? Is open data formats that people can use most easily within their own level of skill and knowledge. But I have a customer that is a major medical device manufacturer. They want to build an amazing application that gives their customers great experience. So when one of their employees goes to a hospital and they want to talk about the units in the oncology lab or the imaging lab or the consumables that they use for that, they're able to have a single user experience so they can have a very fluid conversation with the customer. But of course, these companies grow through inorganic means, right? They buy lots of different companies along the way. So the master data for any of those individual companies is wildly inconsistent and use different verbs and nouns for everything they use. So they have to have some sort of normalization tool across that layer. Otherwise, they're going to talk about going back to old school, like old school master data management, golden record, one data store. At least for my customers, nobody's going back to building that whole thing, despite the fact that we could have a standard and rally around big new data projects. What I am seeing is a lot of creativity at the team level to use, good graph stores or something like that to build a model that everybody can understand and they can actually use to interpolate across their data, both structured and unstructured, that they have in order to deliver a business outcome. And in this case, that's a really great customer experience so they can handle, from one hand, good delivery of their maintenance and management of their patient experience so they don't have downtime in the lab, et cetera. And so that's definitely what I'm seeing across, our base is that people are not going to, wait for a standard from on high. They're getting on with it and delivering systems that deliver value today. And that's a big shift right now from sort of experiment and look for big vendor X or Y to tell me what to do. I see a lot of empowerment in individual teams and organizations forging forward. It is kind of DIY and people are figuring it out on their own. Will that converge over time? One would hope, because it's very wasteful for everybody to create their own world.
All right. I'll come back to structured and unstructured in a second. But one other area which I think, we put on a streaming analytics and decision automation theater here this year, which has gone crazy over there. I mean, it's stacked out all the time, which is a space that's been around for a very long time. Starting way back in Wall Street, many, many years ago with CEP and everything like that. But it seems, we've always gone on deterministic decisions over there. I mean, like streaming data, machine learning models, rules engines, nailed down. So if I've got real-time fraudulent transactions coming in, I'm stopping that thing in flight, right? Now we've got probabilistic reasoning. I mean, agents can hallucinate. And, you know, people are just bandying around, oh yeah, decision automation, no problem. 50% of your decisions will be automated. And I'm looking at this going, you know, is probabilistic dynamic reasoning ready for stopping in-flight fraudulent transactions at a high velocity? Or are we just saying, just choose these to generate the pipelines and stick to machine learning models and rules engine? I mean, how do you see that?
I think first, it depends on the use cases. For highly complex, high-risk areas, you have to use deterministic controls. And what we do is because we have Salesforce objects and the metadata layer, when a customer asks a specific case question, for example, for an insurance, you can't use probabilistic response, right? So it has to be grounded and by retrieving the right object in our vector database. And then but then some of the questions like FAQ, that could be probabilistic, lower level, like it's lower risk. So it really depends on how much accuracy you need to have in serving the customers.
Yeah, I think in high velocity transactions where you can't have a human in the loop and you have to automate, but I can't yet see major banks or major financial services around the world saying, oh yeah, let's just put a large language model in here and it's going to stop everything.
It's not. I mean, right now, at least what we're seeing working with our banking customers is it's an ensemble. And so for the actual fraud detection, outlier detection, is using a fine-tuned, an actual outlier detection approach, right, with good old-fashioned machine learning and training. And yes, you've got your error surface on that as well, right? Even if it's deterministic, you've got an error surface and false positives and so on there. But what we are seeing is the ability to consume that information being helped quite a bit by language models. Mm-hmm. And so one of our customers is in their know your customer, anti-money laundering, et cetera, processes. They use very high-performing, good machine learning models, but what they didn't have was a good case loop. So that had to be interpreted by a human, because if you're going to shut somebody's account down, there's a human in that loop.
Right.
The transaction might be flagged automatically, but the decision to freeze that account is not necessarily. It goes into loop. And we've all gotten the phone call, when you've used your card to fill up petrol in a different place, right? Same kind of thing. But what they had was this, just every time they grew their business, they had this nonlinear growth in call center staff and other people to do that. Now what they're able to do is describe what the predictive models are catching in much more plain English than the models themselves. So they don't have to read, and interpret, p-values and where is this on the ROC AUC curve to understand what the actual performance is.
Right.
They can actually have a description in the context of the transaction, and that's not high velocity because you're only dealing with the subset of outliers that are in the process. So at least what we're seeing is definitely not throwing the old out for the new. On the other hand, boy, is it nice to not have to do feature engineering with language models when you're doing categorization, right? Like multi-class problems got a lot easier with high-performing language models. So I think there's definitely a spectrum there, from high speed to high context.
Okay.
I was going to just add, there's also a cost and performance aspect to it. So sure, the accuracy matters, and you have to, if you need a deterministic response, use something deterministic. But running an LLM in the loop for high velocity, high frequency stuff, it's going to get really, really expensive.
Yeah.
And it's not going to perform the same as a fast model call. So there's different dimensions. The stuff I've seen too is even in the agentic system that do use an LLM, at least what we've been doing, we're putting both together. There's some pieces where it's like, okay, a deterministic decision tree makes a lot more sense than trying to get an LLM to guess, because we know exactly the 3 or 7 things we want to check. So even for the LLM systems, it seems like it's a sort of conglomerate of different approaches.
And you can use the agents to actually orchestrate what goes into
Sure.
an LLM, right?
Or use an agent-based tool to generate
Exactly.
the deterministic scaffold.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to kind of technology stacks and go back to this structured, unstructured thing, because I mean, for me at the moment, we've had for a long time kind of two different stacks, like on the knowledge management side, we've had orchestration and intelligent document processing, and entity extraction and relationship extraction and all that kind of good stuff. And, we've had content management and, we've been, doing graph construction, all these kind of good things, and search and taxonomies. And then on the sort of structured side, totally different stack, right? Again, orchestration, but kind of classic ETL. We've got business glossaries, we've got physical data assets, we've got data ingestion, building warehouses and lake houses and MDMs and feature stores and all those kind of good stuff, right? But now I'm starting to look at it unstructured and I'm going, well, I can see it in data lakes, and I can see it in content management systems. I can see engineering of content to clean and enrich it and integrate it on the one side, and I can also see the same on the structured side, and I'm getting the ability to invoke cognitive services from your average ETL tool to do all this stuff. So why the heck do I need to go and have special purpose, content management software to go and do all of this? But then I'm seeing data catalogs on the structured side and knowledge graphs on the unstructured side, and everybody's into agents, and so I guess my question is, are we going to just see a single stack? Is this just going to merge, or do we leave these worlds doing the same thing effectively with different technologies?
I think they can converge. I think the reason they probably haven't historically is because you always did have these two camps, at least from where I sit as somebody who works for an analytics company. You had the unstructured people like me, and then you had the machine learning people, and that was sort of our bread and butter. We were like nobody wants to do my stuff because my stuff is hard. Language is hard. So we'll just give you a little skeleton crew and you do your thing, and we'll place our focus on structured machine learning because rows and columns make sense to most people. The approaches, though, end up being so similar that if you can get past the fact that we start out as words and realize that we embed, so we become numbers, there's no reason why you can't have one stack. There's no reason why you can't take structured data, unstructured data, add some structure to it, and then do classical machine learning on it. And sometimes when I talk about these things, it blows people's minds. They're like, what? I'm like, yes, because at the end of the day, it's been decades since we just focused on words as words. As soon as we had the capability to add in embeddings and then be able to disambiguate across word senses, like bank of a river versus a river bank, or bank of a river versus financial services institution, magic started to happen. This is something we talked about earlier. So there's no reason why. We just have to get past this stigma that is often placed on unstructured data and makes it look like this thing that is other. It's really not. Data is data. It's just a matter of what you want to do with it and how you transform it so you can actually see some value from it.
So it looks like it could. I mean,
I think utopia is like, yes, you get everything merged in this like one nice framework, and I think it is possible. Reality might be that maybe they just need to talk to each other at the very least. Like we have one example of a customer that we've rolled out to where they built their own, unstructured search and basically use Elation for the structured part, for querying of the database, for cataloging of their assets, et cetera. And those two systems talk to each other, right? So if they ask for something that's in both, it'll go merge and combine the results. I think that's reality of kind of where the advanced companies are today. I do think the utopia is possible where you can get all this merged into one architecture, but it's got to be around business problems, I would say, that actually drive that to get over the line.
all right. Let's move on to governance. I mean, clearly, this world has kind of gone from, years ago when I was presenting around the world on data governance, it was just data quality, and then it went into data privacy, and then it went into access security, and then into sharing and usage, data loss prevention. I mean, it just carried blowing up. And then we had, catalogs have been at the sort of center of that for quite a while. But then big organizations had multiple catalogs. Incidentally, can you just give me a show of hands? How many of you work for a company that's got multiple data catalogs? Not that many. Okay, I'm surprised. I thought it would be a bit larger than that. But,
How many people's budget for data governance and cataloging has gotten cut?
how many people got...
Yeah, so it's still getting funded, and maybe not with a lot of duplication.
Right, well, fair enough. Okay, but I've asked a question on it because at the moment we're buying lots of different tools, and one of the problem here is, as I pointed out this morning, there's no, the industry is a terrible record here. No industry standard widely adopted, and it's not technical reasons, it's business reasons. Because why would you want to give away your metadata? But I'm going to ask this again because I've asked it for 9 years. So this is the 10th year. Do you think we're going to see an industry standard for sharing metadata between tools, or is it just, or is it that we just have to say, stop repeating the work? I mean, because ultimately people will say, well, I'm fed up of doing this again and again across multiple tools, so I'll just go for a single vendor stack. I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
I think one problem, that sort of disincentive to standardize is sort of the commoditization of the data layer, open table formats, and then emerging standards around sort of technical metadata, like iceberg rest and those types of things. The data lock-in is no longer the lock-in layer, but people are now looking at sort of the business catalogs as the layer you can lock in and be sticky on. So then the incentive to make it really easy to get my catalog data from vendor X to vendor Y is kind of, I don't want that to happen. I think that's probably part of the challenge, or why it's been 9 years you asked the question.
Yeah.
Get the same answer.
Okay.
Well, that's what I've seen.
No, okay, I kind of get it. But it does say to me, though, that, I mean, the amount of metadata that we're starting to generate is insane. I mean, and if I'm starting to run observability on agentic workflows with planning agents dynamically deciding on a flow, and I want it all tracked and everything from a governance perspective, I mean, this is off the scale. So, I mean, this is a big data problem, right? I mean, so how does this get solved? I mean, is this like stuff all your metadata in Iceberg? Are we going down an iceberg road again, with SQL, or what's the answer here?
I mean, I think there's two things that are true here that are really important. So one is, like, to the point, are you like cutting your data governance budget? Maybe, but it matters even more moving ahead, like AI governance, right? So taking some of those principles and practices around data governance and kind of classic cataloging, and you thought it was hard when humans were on top, wait till it's agents, right? It matters even more. Lineage, all this complexity that was added into these tools matters even more moving ahead. And the second thing, to kind of David's point, is metadata is kind of the new moat for these AI agents, because how they work is off of context. The way to feed them context is by feeding them this metadata. I do think there should be pushes to kind of standardize sharing these things across different tools. But at the end of the day, all these agents need to talk to each other. And so being sure that, like, whoever is aggregating and collecting this metadata, that I can interop with different agents coming from different vendors or providers, is actually the really important part moving ahead. It might be hard to do that standardization to the point here, because that's the moat, right? So,
well,
but maybe that breaks down some of the walls over time.
Right.
Well, there's a difference between developing and promulgating a standard and standardization. Mm-hmm. One happens in an emergent way, one happens in a declarative way that we all sign up for. I don't think the declarative thing is happening. The answer on that is no. On an emergent case, again, I can only share my lived experience. I'm absolutely getting a lot of pressure from more and more customers to land data in open data formats and simultaneously produce multiple metadata representations for the more dominant tools in that system for that core open data, so they can choose on the basis of who their consumers are, so they can standardize their data architecture. You know, the fabric layer is lower down by saying we're going to use an open data format, and we're going to just incur the cost of multiple metadata representations of that. These 3 customers said, landed in Iceberg, I want to simultaneously have Glue, Unity Catalog, multiple different representations for all of the data, no matter where it comes from, because then my consumers have freedom of choice within the system
That's
itself.
interesting.
So maybe that's an emergent progression towards a better place. I'm not sure.
I mean, the way Salesforce has solved the problem is, with everybody had a lake, then we created zero copy. You get zero copy into your Databricks Snowflake of the world. Then we bring it into Data Cloud, process the data, activate it. We have across all of the different applications, so customers can get value out of it. Is this creating the standards now that Databricks also has zero copy and all of the other players have the similar technology? I think that's potentially the wave of governance.
Okay. We haven't got too much time left here, folks, so I'm going to skip over some of the questions, but I do want to ask one thing. I mean, one of the headlines this year, which I tried to point out very briefly this morning, is the fact that transactional databases have all of a sudden landed, into the data lake, and we're now talking about zero ETL, and I'm looking at this going, and then of course all the hype around open tables, absolutely no question, super valuable and everything, and of course one of the robust features of open tables has been ACID, transactional properties. So are we saying, we're going to have high volume transactional systems, updating open tables and immediately analyzing the same data? Or are we saying transactional databases storing their data with their own proprietary formats, and we're doing some kind of, automated replication that's just surfacing it in open table? I mean, what are we saying here? Is open tables ready for prime time high volume transaction processing?
I don't think so. I mean, I like this question because it's sort of
You're a database man, right?
But I'll keep it short. I mean, I think the biggest problem. So today the table formats are mostly analytic oriented. I mean, you could imagine them being more transaction optimized, but the biggest problem is the model today for the open tables and open formats is I write through to object storage, and I have a protocol, and once I'm done, if my data committed, everyone else can read it. But that's got a latency of hundreds of milliseconds. That's just by definition what the object stores are. High volume transactions need like 1/10 to 100th of that latency. So you can't build it on that model. There has to be low latency storage in the mix, and it changes things. And maybe you could imagine that working its way into catalog layer where you have non-object storage. But I think probably the path of least resistance, because the transactional data isn't in a format that's consumable by analytics efficiently, you got to transform it anyways. So I don't know if it's short-sighted, but I feel like the fact that you have to do that anyways lends itself more towards mirroring with some latency to open formats than actually making the OLTP formats open and on.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Well, look, we're practically out of time. We are out of time. Let me ask you to just wrap this up, because, I mean, you guys know all kinds of things that we don't, in the sense that there's stuff in your research that you're looking out as major issues that you're foreseeing that companies, and without giving away anything NDA, I mean, what advice would you sort of say, what should companies be prioritizing and looking at over the next 12 months? I mean, is there, because there's all of this stuff coming at us, and clearly at the same time, everybody's got to deliver value here. So I mean, what would you say are the sort of things that organizations should look at over the next 12 months, given that what's been going on and the pace of change at the moment?
I think with the talent war, with the crave for value, you need to think about whether you're going to build everything DIY route, or you partner with a trusted platform that's already built a lot of the security controls in place and the metadata layer and the integration layers to get fastest time to value. Because agentic AI is here to stay. A lot of some companies that we're working with are already getting tremendous amount of business value out of it. The implication is that creates a huge competitive advantage. So I think about, okay, if I'm the CEO of a company, what is my core competency and how do I leverage generative AI, agentic AI to unlock more value for my business so I can stay competitive and grow my business? Understanding data, fundamental. Everybody has to understand it across the entire company. But how you ride and lead this wave, you have to approach it from a business standpoint.
Okay. Chris?
Well,
I would say metadata. Metadata is the moat for AI as you're moving ahead. So I would really focus on how am I curating metadata, how am I making it easy to use for AI, and am I getting locked into a vendor that is forcing me to keep that metadata just with them, just on their cloud, just on their warehouse, whatever it is, or is it a vendor that will let me go and play with the outside ecosystem? Because this is not a one person wins all game. You're going to want to partner with many people.
Yeah, I think sort of is feeding all of that sort of one layer lower. You have to have a unified data strategy. You know, even if you're partnering with other vendors to do your agentic stuff, if you don't have a way to bring together your structured and unstructured data, a lot of the stuff we were talking about today, you need that strategy. If you don't invest in that, you're not going to be able to unlock that value that these other layers bring.
And I said it earlier, make sure you have a narrowly defined, well-scoped use case. And I know it sounds ridiculous to be talking about this, but I talk to many people who say, we want to do agentic AI. And I'll say, well, what's your use case? We don't have one yet. That is not the way to operate.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I'd say +1 in particular to finding a good business use case, but really return on invested capital time is now. Experimentation time is over, at least in my customer base. People are very serious about gaining competitive advantage and disrupting their own industries. I think it's incumbent upon us to work for companies that are trying to be successful to push through blockages we may be facing and find the thing that takes out that administrative overhead, that helps you serve your customers better, that delivers more value to market now, and then use that to evolve into kind of a repeatable architecture. It's starting to look an awful lot like a 3-tier API-centric architecture with data stores, orchestration, and user experience, and we don't have to overcomplicate it, just go. Otherwise, you're going to be in the trying to play catch up, and it's a power law. And the power law acceleration with this stuff is real.
Okay, well, I know it's happy hour, so a few of you have disappeared. So we won't keep you any longer between you and the beers that are out there on the show floor. So just please help me thank all the panelists for coming on today. Thank you very much. And if I could ask one other favor of you guys, if you could all stand up, because we're going to do a group photo and we're going to get in a line and take a picture for all you guys behind us. And if you really want, you can clap so we can just get a standing ovation. Let's see if we can. Hang on, let me get my.
This is the data fam.
I know. I switched my phone off, so it's making me put my password in. Right. Here we go. So, group selfie. Hang on. If I could switch it around. Here we go. Are we in? Are everybody in? Oh, okay. One more. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, folks.